Hello to all of you Helldivers out there. My name is the Mad Scorpion, and today I'll be doing a little bit of a different video because in the past I did a evaluation of enemies I thought were a bit overtuned and in needing of nerfs or otherwise problems in the sandbox, and I made a follow-up video talking about how the sandbox has evolved without Helldivers evolving along with it in a way. So I want to take a moment to pass across the many different weapons of Helldivers and see which ones are exceptionally lacking in terms of usefulness, or at least in plain view knowledge. Some things that need desperate buffs to actually be relevant. Now, I will go over everything in the primary, secondary, and grenade, as well as stratagem category that I think needs improvement. But, however, in case this runs long, there will be chops in between and taking some things into separate videos. So if it sounds like one starts in a weird spot or one ends in a weird spot, that is why, because I am chopping it in half or in parts. Because last time I tried this, before I even made it out of the primaries, it was already close to half an hour. But hopefully I can keep my ramblings down, but let's get started with the primary weapons. Going from top to bottom, we have the assault rifle category. Now, frankly, I do think some of them are perfectly fine. The Liberator, Liberator Penetrator, the 1-2, as well as the Tenderizer, Adjudicator, Suppressor, Liberator Carbine. All of those I feel like are perfectly fine where they are. I may have my own gripes with the Adjudicator. It may just in reality not be meant for me. But the rest of them, I do think there is something that needs addressing. Definitely on the start of it is the Liberator Concussive. This is practically off the charts of use or popularity charts bad. It is so underutilized or otherwise poor in terms of its uses. Now, to give you an idea of how bad this is, I was trying it for a round and used it in the footage that I was acquiring stuff about War Striders, talking about the original sandbox enemies and all of them and how something's a little bit overtuned. Somebody, I recall, commented on my video, said that my opinions were irrelevant simply because I was using the Liberator Concussive in 2025. And if that doesn't tell you how bad it is in perspective or comparing to the rest of the ARs, it really should give you a tune. Now, stat-wise, it may not look that bad, but in performance, the concussive stagger rounds really just don't do anything worth noting in this day and age. Sure, it might be more damage compared to the rest of the stunning weapons, but in reality, what it stuns, it takes too long to actually matter, and plenty of times with something like the Liberator, something is already dead, where with the Liberator Concussive, it just started to be staggered. So, flat out, I think it can replace the staggering concussive, and more so can just get up straight up frag rounds of some sort. Explosive rounds, not so much like the Eruptor, maybe shrapnel rounds in small doses. For all we know, maybe just exploding hollow points, so like the Dominator, where it embeds into something and there's a slight explosion there. And with that idea, they could hopefully increase the damage that this thing does, because that's one of the flat out things that I think needs improvement, because its stagger already is pitiful, as well as the damage just generally not being worth it. I would rather take any of the other Liberators on the list, even the AR-12, practically every other assault rifle I would take before the Liberator Concussive. Next up, I'm just going to kind of lump this all together with the other crossover weapons, the Killzone, AR, SMG, and Sniper, as well as the Halo, AR, Shotgun, and Pistol, as well as the SMG. I think they all need access to attachments, and at the very minimum, scopes for the ones that can accept them. I know with like the Halo AR, there's not really room for scopes. I know scopes on ARs only really became a thing with like Halo 5. But on the other notes, it's just everything the same thing with the Killzone rifle. It was good compared to the basic Liberator. And then the Liberator got attachments and it kind of left this thing behind because it's only light pen, there's no extra features about it. It is just a straight up lead slinger. Sure, it may have a little bit more capacity compared to the basic Liberator, but once it got a drum, its capacity wasn't comparable, and with attachments and everything else like that, it is basically more fire rate, more recoil, less rounds, and just about the same amount of damage. Quite literally, if it had access to something like a red dot, it would improve its chances of being picked, as well as just the idea of being able to put patterns on these things. It's something the Helldivers community has been asking for quite a long time. Just the ability to level up the crossover weapons and put Helldivers patterns on them. And especially cases like this where I have modded patterns, I would love to see a more shiny Damascus Halo AR. But on a front page, all of the crossover weapons I feel need access to patterns, scopes, maybe a little bit more than that, maybe some muzzle attachments, but I think we can limit it there. We don't need drum mags on everything. We don't need weird short mags. I think just barrels or barrel attachments and scopes can be fine for all of the crossover weapons. Now, the Pacifier, I desperately think this one does need a drum. Its scope options are fine. Its performance is perfectly good. It performs admirably in terms of its recoil, its fire rate, everything else like that. But even comparing to all of the other ARs running siege-ready armor, I still regularly run out of ammo with the Pacifier. It could be a side effect of the fact that it requires more rounds to kill the average thing because of its low damage, just because of its stunning capabilities. But in the same respect, I am running out of ammo way more consistently than any other rifle. It really makes it so that either they need to increase the total mags you can carry, or just give it a drum while also increasing the total mags you can carry. Straight up, more ammo is required because I know updating its damage or buffing its damage output in any way would probably make it too powerful. Or I would say increase the damage, dial back the fire rate a little bit, and lower the stunning capability to compensate for the increased damage. And maybe it is exactly what the Liberator Concussive should have been. But then there is the Coyote. Now, something that's a little bit of a gripe with me. It's nothing about its incendiary capabilities or its performance, but quite literally, these scopes. Why in the world does it have a 10x sniper scope? Does literally anyone out there use it? Because I get there is some scenarios in the bot front where you can put on a sniper scope, put it into semi-automatic, and just ping heads from a distance, but I don't even think it has enough damage to one-tap a head in comparison to the rest of them. I know things like the Liberator needs like 2 shots, and that's 90 damage, and this is only 75, so you need more than 1. However, in reality, I would love the Coyote way better if instead of a 10x sniper scope, you replaced that with a 2x tube red dot like the Liberator has. The red cross scope, low zoom, enough to make it competitive at range without making it too long range. It would do perfect for the Coyote. And in another hindsight, just for broad spectrum of Helldivers, why does the original reflex sight still exist when you have the options? Because I'm pretty sure outside of not having access to it, if you have the choice between the Reflex Mark II or the basic Reflex, I'm fairly certain majority of the community would just straight up take the Reflex Mark II. I have no idea why the original Reflex still exists unless it was on something that couldn't get rid of it. So, aside from that, that is kind of what I'm thinking about the Coyote. It needs the Sniper scope replaced with a 2x red dot scope, because who actually uses a 10x scope on a full auto AR? But in that same perspective with the Coyote, I do think the splash effect on its rounds does need a little bit of a reduction, because there's plenty of times that I've taken the Coyote into bot territory where fighting something like a Devastator or something otherwise that it benefits being accurate, or something that could benefit from hitting the small weak spot as opposed to just saying medium armor penetration and just shooting the entire center mass. I would love if the flash effect on the rounds impacting was reduced, because there's plenty of times I try to aim for the head, but in a spray, I cannot tell where I'm looking at, so I end up just shooting all over the place and dumping a bunch of extra rounds that I didn't need to waste. Now, that is pretty much all I have to say for the ARs in the category. Like I mentioned, everything else is pretty in a solid place. I do think the Adjudicator, it feels a little bit wrong for me, but at the same time, that could be just me being weird and not that the rifle is wrong. I would love a drum on anything that could take it, but at the same time, I kind of miss when the Adjudicator was a marksman's rifle a little bit. Now, speaking of marksman's rifles, there's not much I can say in terms of these weapons, but it is something that I forgot to mention in the intro, and I wish Arrowhead would flirt with the idea of separate sandbox weaponry. In that instance, I would say something like the sensor. It works beautifully in the bot front, especially with stealth operations, but in terms of the Terminids and the Squids, not so much. A little bit because it's a little bit lower power in comparison, but if they introduced a mechanic where there was faction-specific ammo types offered, like the AP rounds for automatons, because, you know, it's armor and metal, but you had flesh rendering hollow points for the Terminids and the fleshy squids. I would love it if they introduced something to benefit marksman's rifles and things like that, because definitely marksman's rifles, they benefit from aiming for the head for crit points. Sure, there is plenty of heads that you can aim for in terms of the Terminids, but when you're being swarmed by so many things, hunters, pouncers, as well as little spitters, hive guards, commanders, everything coming at you, there's so many heads that sure enough, before too long, you will be overwhelmed. If there was some sort of exploding hollow point or just flesh rendering hollow point that could be developed to take into and swap out between factions to improve their viability, it would definitely benefit some weapons being good in only one faction as opposed to being really good in one faction and being okay in other ones. That's kind of my whole theory with the various marksman's rifles, because they're all accuracy-based weapons. If you can hit the head, it's good. If you can hit the body with something like the Deadeye, it's still good. But at the same time, restrictive mag size and everything else like that, there's many reasons why the variety of marksman's rifles really only excel in terms of the bot front and maybe the squid front, but less so in that terms. But moving on, the submachine guns. Now, I said my piece about the Killzone SMG, and it is really the case with the Halo SMG. I despise the sight on this thing, because in terms of commando missions, where this thing would be meant for, because, you know, suppressed SMG, anytime I try to first-person shoot with this thing, I cannot hit anything. Now, there could be a skill issue, you could say that, but in reality, I understand that a lot of the crossover weapons are one-to-one copies. I'll also talk about that with the Halo pistol. I can accept they are perfect replicas in terms of the original source. Man, do I wish I could change out the scope, though. If I could get something like what the Knight has, the same 2x2 red dot, or the 1.5 tube red dot, something short zoom that just gives me a better reticle I can hit in a better field of view overall, I would appreciate that on the Halo SMG so much more, because then I would actually be able to use it in terms of stealth use. Outside of that, there's not much else I can really say about it. It's okay in the end of the day. One-handed, light penetration suppressed, decent enough damage. But in terms of the SMGs, I honestly think that the Defender and the Pummeler, they could benefit from the idea of swapped ammo types, because right now, there is no real difference between the two of them. Yes, one does more damage, one has a little bit less recoil than the other and a little bit less fire rate, one has the stunning slow rounds. But at this point, we have 3 different platforms of stunning weapons: the Pacifier, the Concussive, and the Pummeler. And one, I feel like, is only used if you're planning on using an energy shield, but if you're planning on, or something else that's like a one-handed item, but if you're using that, why use the stun version when the lethal version can kill things quicker than it would stun kill anyways? I get the idea is crowd control or stunning something really big that's charging at you, but in reality, that can only be so many things, because if it's something heavy that's charging at you, it can do jack crap to help you. So I honestly think that the Pummeler and the Defender, there might just need to be a quality of life update where they roll them into one and just add a attachment to like the Polar Patriots. I think that's what it came from, the Polar Patriots War Bond, and unlock stunning rounds for the Defender, or the stunning configuration. So if you wanted one, you can take the other, and then you can just roll it all into one weapon. That is my own little take on it. It may be a hot take. Honestly, I don't know why these two are separate weapons when in reality they are the same thing, but one is just way less lethal. So moving into shotguns, I kind of think all of these need a buff, flat out, because if I'm thinking about taking the Slugger, I would just rather take the Deadeye. Sure, the Slugger has more ammo in the tube, but the Deadeye has more general consistency in terms of its accuracy. The Punisher, it's okay. It's sure it has one of the most damaging shots of any shotgun, but it's still only light ammo penetrating. Plus, if I'm taking the Punisher, I might as well take the Cookout, because the incendiary part of it can ignore armor, so things like hive guards or otherwise devastators, that can be the solution. Plus, it has a lot of pushback in its hits. The Halt, I think it just straight up needs more damage, because sure, medium penetration with armor piercing flechettes is good, but anytime I take this into the bot front where medium penetration really strives more so, it does not compare to some other weapons. Like I said, with the Deadeye, 2 shots to the upper body, maybe 3 shots consistently. Meanwhile, the Halt is more like 3 to 5 shots consistently, aiming for center mass. Sure, that might not be the place to aim for the Halt. Maybe the legs would be the more obvious shot, but still 3 to 5 shotgun shells to center mass to kill a medium-sized target, not really useful. Plus, the light arm penetrating the stun rounds, I'm not sure how much that comes into play nowadays in reality. A weird take I may have on the Double Freedom, I think it has too much accuracy. The pellet spread on this thing, it is so tight, I end up missing more because I think it's a shotgun. I fire at center mass, but turns out it is a excessively tight spread. So because of that, I miss because I forgot it wasn't a shotgun. It was a lead thrower that has a very good MOA. But on that note, I just think it needs to have a little bit more spread, or maybe there's an option to have more spread or like a choke or something. I know double barrel chokes is kind of like a meme or a cursed addition, but at the same time, it's the Double Freedom is so weird to me. Its spread is just so tight that I can never actually hit anything with shotgun type effectiveness. Now, the Halo shotgun, it's in a weird spot because I haven't used it a lot in the modern day. And I know it is the hardest hitting shotgun, and it's pretty much the Punisher if it just wanted to be tougher as opposed to more ammo. I can't really say much about it, but the breakers across the board, they all feel lacking in damage in this day. It feels like the Breaker Incendiary got nerfed in terms of its fire capacity not too long ago. The Spray and Pray, literally, who actually uses this? I tried it once in terms of the Illuminate front where it should excel because it's meant to be, you know, clearing up smaller, more targets, more ammo, better rate of fire, and bleh. But it really just straight up sucked in terms of the Illuminate territory. And the same with the Breaker. I want to like it. I tried it in the Illuminate territory. It just does not carry enough wallop. It may be a fallout of the original days of early Helldivers when the Breaker was the thing to kill literally everything out on the field. And because of that, it got nerfed to the point where it would never be changed again. I just really think the Breaker, all 3 of the Breaker series, they all need a little bit of love in this day and age. A little bit more damage, a little more durable damage, some more power, maybe increased light penetration. Not so much medium, but the highest rating of light pen for something like the Breaker. The Spray and Pray, actually make it birdshot, because I actually watched a video talking about the Breaker Spray and Play. Apparently birdshot has like at least like some 100 pellets in it, and the Helldivers version has only like 16 pellets, which means it's not at all a good idea of a birdshot. So I would just hope that maybe the birdshot can be improved. Otherwise, I can't think of anything else to actually make it better. Aside from that, the Spray and Pray, it may just be a crap weapon. There's no good way to say it. The explosives category, I definitely think that the Crossbow and Eruptor are all in a good spot. The only thing I could think of in terms of the Crossbow that I have a gripe with is the scope options. I would love a little bit of a longer range scope, maybe a 4x, maybe as well. I would love a custom scope for the Crossbow that gives you a ballistic readout, basically like a aim this long at so many meters kind of scope. But I know the ballistics on the Crossbow is already pretty solid. It flies pretty straight and far on its own, so maybe it is not needed. But I would hope maybe that opens the Crossbow up to more folks, is a ballistic kind of scope that gives you a key on where to aim, like how the recoilless rifle, how the rings, that is indicative of certain distances. Like if I recall, the dot is the center sight, and the first ring is like 150 meters out, and the second and the large ring is like over 250. It's hard to describe personally. I forget the specifics. But moving on, the energy based. This all is a rough section, because I would love, in terms of all of the heat-based weapons like the Trident, the Sickle, and the Double Edge, I would love if the Scythe's attachment that allows it to either take on more heat before overheating or allows the heat to dissipate quicker without overheating. I would desperately hope those other attachments could make its way to both the Sickle and the Trident. I think it would remove the whole stick about the Double Edge, but I'll get into that more later. As a quick note, I just wish that could go to all of the other heat-based weapons. Now, the Plasma Punisher. Man, I just can't really talk about this one in a good light. I tried it, it felt weird. Even after buff, it hasn't been buffed since. I just cannot get behind using it. I don't know if it's the excessive drop or the weird fire rate, or it's just lack of overall damage. It's just, I cannot get behind the Punisher Plasma. And the same with the Accelerator Rifle. If it was heavy pen, it might be a little bit different considering burst, or maybe some rounds in the burst are heavy while the last round is a big large or heavy penetration. I don't know. But again, I would like attachments for crossover weapons. The Blitzer, there isn't much I can say about it because it's infinite ammo. It's got pretty good lightning about it. There isn't much I can say that isn't just improving lightning off the rip. So I'm just going to leave that alone. The Scythe, like I mentioned, I would hope that its attachment of heat sinks can go elsewhere. There isn't much I can say about it. Sure, it's effective on its own, even if it is like a tickle gun in reality. But moving on, the double edge. I was more of a fan of the double-edged Sickle when it came out, when it only had medium armor penetration. Now, not long after, it kind of got nerfed that the heat generates, and as the heat generates, you transition from light, medium to heavy. I would rather hope that a function can be added to the double-edged Sickle where you have light mode, medium mode, and heavy mode with different heat generation in each mode. Of course, light being the lightest generation of heat, and medium being a more extreme heat generation, and heavy being massive generation. You generate heat incredibly quick in comparison to the rest, and from that point you can pick and choose how you wish to use the Sickle, and it still has the overheat mechanic, but in that same respect it would solve the issue I have with current double edge, where sure, it may have heavy armor penetration, but you have to go all the way to actually get it, and that is just not effective in this day and age. Now, the Trident, I honestly don't have anything bad to say about it. I do wish it had more scopes, or maybe a little bit lengthier. Actually, no, it has a 2x2. That's more than fine. But my one issue is that I used it on Cyberstan, and I used it on a heat planet, and there was such a degree of difference between using it on cold and heat. I know obvious is obvious. The heat is going to make it hard to use heat-based weaponry, but it was not at all nearly effective. You ran out in like less than 2 seconds of a burst in using it on a heat planet, and that just shredded heat sinks to the point that it almost felt like using this weapon on a heat planet was not even a logical choice. Now, moving on, the only issue I have between the Purifier and the Scorcher is the fact that the Scorcher runs out of ammo so quickly. I know that is probably a part of the pros and cons because, you know, it's got really good damage, it's consistent killer, explosive in terms of its rounds, and otherwise a pretty controllable rifle. Now, I know that is the drawback that it could have, is the fact that it only carries 4 mags on standard and 6 with siege ready, and you run out of ammo pretty quickly. I would just hope that sometime soon that chain can be lifted because, again, it's kind of like the Pacifier, but in a good way. I run out of ammo so quickly with this thing. I feel like it just needs a little bit of love in that category. I wouldn't say it is, how do I say this? I wouldn't say it's in need of a buff, but man, if I'm asking, I would love to see more ammo for it. The Purifier is not in that category. I definitely think the Purifier is actually in a pretty good state. Even using overcharges and everything else like that, it does not run out of ammo nearly the same as other things. So I would hope that the ammo increase could go to the Scorcher, since it is kind of the ammo burner in comparison. Now, wrapping up the first category with the special weapons, we have the variable, which I do not know how to describe the odd feeling of the VG70 variable, but in perspective, when I had it in automatic mode, treating it like a standard AR, it did not function nearly the same as things like the Liberator Carbine, the Tenderizer. It was just so inaccurate, so short range, that it just did not feel like this thing had the chops to actually be used as an AR. Sure, its special tricks of the total shot and the volley shot might be where it truly shines, but in reality, that is not always going to be the purpose of it, and it is an AR with, you know, the weird freaking, I forget what it's called when the rounds are stacked against each other, but either way, I desperately think the variable needs a little bit of ergonomics to actually allow it to perform like an AR, so you aren't only using the total and the volley. But next up is the Torture. Honestly, is this even used? I know there's the firebugs that love to take an entire flame-based loadout with the Torture, Crisper, flame grenades, flamethrower, hot dog, orbital napalm, and eagle napalm, but that is also a maniac pyro out there. I don't know what it is that could be done about the Torture. I think it is off the books, not used, but at the same time, it is given so many buffs because of the fact that it is a flamethrower, and in reality, fire can kill anything out there. It's just a matter of how long. So I'm not sure what can be said about the Torture to actually improve it, aside from maybe actually somehow figuring a way to actually create attachments for it. Maybe some form of shorter, smaller canister with lighter fuel that burns faster, or maybe something else like a larger can that shoots caustic, or maybe, like I was thinking earlier, maybe you can actually add an attachment to it that allows it to fight an incendiary cloud or a gaseous combustible cloud that when used with the Torture creates a detonation effect. But that is just, you know, my headcanon and all that. And lastly, the Dominator. I don't think a damn thing needs to change about it. I know it's still nerfed from a way it was some time ago, but in terms of its usefulness, it bonks, it's accurate, it has good damage, it has a decent enough ammo supply. I maybe would ask for a few extra rounds in capacity in terms of, like, storage, but that is just me. That is what I would hope to see if the Dominator gets buffed, and of course, it's the Dominator. Give it all the damage. But let's move on into the secondaries and actually checking the time. This has gone on long enough, so I would go over the secondaries, throwables, and maybe the stratagems in another video. But with that, I will see you in the next video.